"It's us against the world, Ellie," he said, and then he went on to destroy me completely. "But I have other plans and he won't seem coming." The air in the cramped graduate lab hummed with the low thrum of overclocked servers and the fervent energy of two brilliant minds colliding. Elena Rossi, her dark hair escaping its messy bun, leaned over Adrian Steele's shoulder, her finger tracing a complex line of code shimmering on the holoscreen. "See the recursion here? It's elegant, Adrian, but it's bottlenecking the predictive depth. We need a Markov chain overlay, weighted for temporal decay." Adrian turned, his startlingly blue eyes alight with the shared spark of discovery. "You're right. Again." He grinned, a boyish, disarming expression that had first captivated her across a crowded seminar hall 3 years prior. "It's why I need you, Ellie. Us. Against the entropy of the universe." He captured her tracing finger, his thumb brushing her knuckles. The world outside the lab, the relentless Boston winter, the pressures of their PhD program, the uncertain future, dissolved into the warm, focused bubble they created together. Their shared ambition wasn't just academic, it was visceral. They dreamed of cracking the code of human behavior, not merely observing it, but subtly guiding it towards efficiency, understanding, perhaps even better choices. Late nights fueled by lukewarm ramen noodles and cold pizza became their crucible. Out of that shared exhaustion and exhilaration, Viridian Dynamics was born. Named after a constellation Adrian had pointed out on their first real date, it started as little more than a shared server cluster in a sublet garage, the scent of damp concrete mingling with ozone from their humming machines. Elena was the architect, the intuitive genius. Adrian was the charismatic force, the strategist who could sell ice to a snowman. Together, they were dynamite. Elena's magnum opus emerged from countless iterations, fueled by Adrian's relentless belief in her, Ariadne's thread. It wasn't just prediction, it was elegant, near, invisible influence. It could nudge consumer preferences, optimize traffic flow in real time, anticipate resource needs with uncanny accuracy. It was the holy grail, the algorithm that promised not just wealth, but a reshaping of systems. Viridian Dynamics, fueled by Ariadne's thread, rocketed from garage obscurity to the gleaming pinnacle of Silicon Harbor. The night before the IPO was a blur of flashing cameras. They stood on the balcony of their new, absurdly luxurious penthouse overlooking the city they aimed to transform. Adrian pulled Elena close, his arms a familiar anchor. The city lights reflected in his eyes, but beneath the triumph, she saw a flicker of something else. A tautness, a suppressed intensity. "It's us against the world, Ellie," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion that felt genuine, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Always. This is just the beginning, our beginning." "Always," she echoed, leaning into him, a profound sense of belonging washing over her. The years of struggle, the sacrifices, it had all been for this moment, for them. Hours later, euphoria still buzzing faintly under her skin, Elena approached the gleaming chrome and glass monolith that was Viridian's new headquarters. She swiped her keycard at the imposing lobby entrance. Access denied. Frowning, she tried again. Same result, a flicker of unease sparked in her gut. She pulled out her phone to message Adrian. Message undeliverable, her corporate email, account suspended. The unease bloomed into cold panic. She accessed the Viridian servers remotely, her fingers flying over her personal tablet with practiced speed, bypassing lower-level security with protocols she had designed. What she found was a meticulously executed annihilation. Ariadne's thread, her life's work, every line of code, every research note, every prototype iteration, gone. Erased. Not corrupted, not misplaced. Deleted. In its place, within the core development repository, was a single, stark file, Steele, primary algorithm, final, Odysseus. Adrian's name was the sole author attribution. Her breath hitched. This couldn't be real. A nightmare. A cruel joke. Then she found the logs. Encrypted, buried deep, but not deep enough for her. Fabricated communication trails, timestamps meticulously altered, showing Elena Rossi transferring core Viridian IP, specifically, the architecture of Ariadne's thread, to a shell company linked to their fiercest competitor, Omnicorp. The evidence was chillingly thorough, terrifyingly convincing. It painted a picture of calculated, greedy betrayal. She stumbled back from the tablet screen, the world tilting. The gleaming lobby, the polished floor, the indifferent hum of the city, it all seemed monstrously alien. Security guards, faces she vaguely recognized, materialized, their expressions professionally impassive, but radiating a newfound authority. "Ms. Rossi, you need to come with us." It wasn't a request. She was escorted, numb, to the boardroom. Adrian was already there, standing at the head of the long obsidian table. The faces of the board members, investors she'd pitched to, advisors she'd respected, were masks of cold disapproval. Adrian looked devastated. His shoulders slumped, his face pale, etched with lines of profound sorrow. The performance was Oscar-worthy. Elena. His voice cracked, thick with manufactured grief. He couldn't meet her eyes. I can't believe it. We trusted you. I trusted you. He turned to the board, his expression one of heartbroken resignation. I loved her, more than anything, but she chose greed over us, over everything we built. The accusations rained down, cold and hard, backed by the damning digital evidence she had just unearthed. Her protests were drowned out, dismissed as the desperate lies of a traitor caught red-handed. The board voted unanimously. Elena Rossi was stripped of her founder's shares, her title, her access, her reputation. She was branded a thief, a corporate saboteur, a woman who had betrayed the man who loved her and the dream they shared. Overnight, her world imploded. Newsfeeds screamed her treachery. Former colleagues crossed the street to avoid her. Legal threats from Viridian loomed. The penthouse was locked. Her accounts frozen pending investigation. She was a pariah, toxic. The man she had trusted with her intellect, her heart, her very soul, had not just stolen her work, he had meticulously crafted her destruction to cement his sole control and glory. The pillar of their love had been a carefully constructed trapdoor. The pillar of her genius had been dismantled and rebranded as his own. She was left standing on nothing but rubble. 5 years later, the name Elena Rossi was a ghost in the digital graveyard of corporate scandals. In its place lived Alina Ravel, a name whispered in the shadowy corners of the tech underworld. She existed in the spaces between firewalls, a spectral presence known only by her alias, the Weaver. The raw, agonizing grief of betrayal hadn't softened. It had undergone a brutal metamorphosis. It calcified, layer upon agonizing layer, into a core of pure, diamond, hard vengeance. She had vanished from the grid, using the very skills Adrian had tried to erase to disappear completely. She honed her craft in anonymity, becoming a legend, the freelance data strategist who could untangle any digital knot, bypass any security, manipulate any system with ruthless, untraceable efficiency. She worked through layers of proxies, phantom servers in non-extradition countries, her true location and identity, a closely guarded secret known only to the most sophisticated encryption protocols. Her fees were exorbitant, her methods opaque, her reputation built on results that bordered on the supernatural. Her clients were governments, oligarchs, shadowy entities, anyone who could pay the price and ask no questions. Her singular, all-consuming goal was not profit, but demolition, to dismantle Adrian Steele and the empire of Viridian Dynamics, brick by digital brick. Time hadn't softened Viridian, it had amplified it. Under Adrian's relentless, often ruthless leadership, Viridian had become a global tech behemoth, its tendrils embedded in finance, logistics, security, even healthcare. Ariadne's thread, rebranded as Viridian Predictive Core, was the beating heart of it all, generating obscene profits and consolidating terrifying power. Adrian Steele was now a fixture on magazine covers, a titan of industry, polished, powerful, seemingly untouchable. The sight of his face on a newsfeed, the sound of his voice in an interview, was a fresh twist of the knife buried deep in Alina's psyche. Her moment arrived, cloaked in corporate vulnerability. Viridian, in its relentless expansion, had acquired Kronos Logistics, a major player struggling with catastrophic system-wide delivery failures. Predictive routing algorithms were failing spectacularly. Packages vanished, deadlines were obliterated, customer fury was boiling over. The acquisition, meant to solidify Viridian's logistics dominance, was rapidly turning into a multi-billion-dollar PR disaster. Stock prices were dipping, analysts were sharpening their knives, and Adrian Steele needed a miracle. His internal teams were baffled. External consultants offered band-aid solutions. The problem was buried deep within Kronos' antiquated, jury-rigged systems, intertwined now with Viridian's own complex infrastructure. He needed someone who could see the patterns others missed, who could operate not just with skill, but with near-clairvoyant insight. He needed the impossible made possible. He needed the Weaver. The encrypted request landed in one of Alina's countless dead-drop digital mailboxes. The message was direct, offering a blank check fee for an immediate remote intervention to diagnose and fix Kronos' predictive routing before the situation became terminal for the acquisition. It was signed simply, Adrian Steele, CEO, Viridian Dynamics. Alina stared at the name on the screen, the characters burning themselves onto her retinas. 5 years of planning, of honing her skills in the dark, had led to this precise moment. A cold, predatory smile touched her lips, devoid of warmth, fueled by the icy furnace of her hatred. This wasn't just an opportunity, it was poetic justice served on a silver platter. He was inviting the architect of his ruin into the very heart of his kingdom. She accepted the contract, her alias and digital fortress impenetrable. Her plan was a masterpiece of elegant cruelty. Infiltrate Viridian systems under Adrian's own desperate, trusting invitation. Gain his confidence by fixing Kronos, a task she could achieve effortlessly by deploying a modified, vastly superior version of her own Ariadne's thread, subtly woven into Kronos's code. Let him feel relief, even gratitude. Let him lean on the Weaver. And then, once embedded deep within Viridian's digital nervous system, once she had gathered enough leverage and planted enough subtle, undetectable flaws in critical systems, she would pull the trigger. One command. A cascade of failures, a stock market plunge of epic proportions, a global infrastructure glitch bearing the Viridian logo. A collapse so spectacular, so total, it wouldn't just bury Adrian's steel, it would erase Viridian dynamics from the map. She would make him watch his empire crumble, knowing exactly who had engineered it, knowing it was retribution served 5 years cold. She would make him feel the desolation he had inflicted upon her. The stage was set, the players were in position. The curtain was about to rise on the second act of their twisted drama. Alina Ravel, the Weaver, took a deep breath, the sterile air of her hidden safe house tasting like anticipation. The game was on. Adrian Steele had just hired his own destroyer. The secure holoconference chamber was a void of pure, depthless black, broken only by the shimmering nebula of data points that served as the Weaver's avatar. Alina Ravel observed the connection stabilize from her remote safe house, the familiar hum of powerful servers a constant backdrop. Her fingers rested lightly on the haptic interface, cool and steady. Years of anonymity had sculpted her into a creature of pure logic and control. Yet, as Adrian Steele's holographic form materialized across the digital divide, a phantom tremor threatened her composure. He looked older. The boyish charm had hardened into the sharp angles of command. Lines etched the corners of his startlingly blue eyes, deeper than 5 years should have carved. Shadows pooled beneath them, speaking of relentless pressure and sleepless nights. His suit was impeccably tailored, a uniform of power, but it couldn't disguise a certain weariness, a brittleness beneath the polished surface. The sight ignited a familiar, corrosive fury within Alina, instantly quelled by the icy mantle of the Weaver. "Welcome, Weaver." Adrian's voice was smooth, professional, carrying the confident timbre of a CEO accustomed to deference. Yet, beneath the surface, Alina detected a strain, a barely perceptible edge of desperation. Kronos was bleeding Viridian dry. "Thank you for accepting this urgent contract. Kronos Logistics is hemorrhaging credibility." "Understood," the Weaver responded, her voice modulated into a genderless, synthetic baritone, devoid of inflection. The nebula avatar pulsed faintly. "Transmit full system diagnostics, network architecture schematics, and the last 72 hours of operational logs. Prioritize failure points flagged as critical." Adrian nodded, his gaze fixed on the shifting data cloud. "It's being streamed now. Our internal diagnostics are inconclusive. The failures seem random, yet systemic." Alina absorbed the torrent of information flooding her dedicated, isolated Viridian connection. Her mind, honed by years of analyzing complex systems and Adrian's own deceit, dissected Kronos' digital corpse with brutal efficiency. She saw the clumsy integration points, the decaying legacy code, the cascading errors born of Viridian's own aggressive protocols overriding Kronos' fragile logic. It was a mess, a predictable, profitable mess for the Weaver to exploit. "The problem isn't randomness," the Weaver stated, the modulated voice cutting through Adrian's summary. "It's predictable incompetence. Your integration team treated Kronos' core routing algorithm like a stubborn child, forcing Viridian protocols onto it without understanding its intrinsic dependencies. You introduced deterministic chaos." Her avatar highlighted specific code blocks and network pathways on the shared holodisplay, her explanations precise, surgical, and utterly damning of Viridian's internal processes. Adrian leaned forward, his holographic image flickering slightly. He wasn't used to being spoken to with such unvarnished authority, especially by a phantom. Yet, instead of offense, Alina saw fascination ignite in his eyes, a spark of the old intellectual hunger. "Deterministic chaos, explain," he commanded. But the tone held genuine curiosity, not challenge. For the next hour, the Weaver dissected Kronos' flaws with ruthless clarity. She spoke of weighted decision trees corrupted by incompatible data formats, of feedback loops amplified into system seizures, of predictive models starved of relevant historical context. Her insights cut to the core, bypassing layers of corporate obfuscation. She saw Adrian absorbing it, the CEO momentarily forgotten, replaced by the sharp, analytical PhD student she'd once loved debating late into the night. "Your analysis, it's uncanny," Adrian murmured, his gaze intense on the shifting nebula. A shadow passed over his face, a flicker of something deeply unsettling. "It reminds me of someone. Someone with a particular way of seeing patterns others miss." He paused, his eyes searching the data cloud as if trying to pierce its veil. "A very specific brilliance." Inside her shielded chamber, Alina's breath hitched, her real heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic prisoner. "He remembers." The cold fury surged, a welcome counterpoint to the treacherous pang of something else. "Good. Let him squirm. Let him feel the ghost." "Irrelevant." The Weaver's voice remained a flat, synthetic plane. "Focus on the solution. I require unfettered root access to the Chronos-Viridian integration layer. And autonomy. My methods are proprietary." Adrian hesitated for only a fraction of a second. The potential for corporate espionage was immense. But the alternative was watching Chronos, and a significant chunk of Viridian's valuation, implode. Desperation won. "Granted," he said, the word heavy with consequence. "Do what you must. Just fix it." And so it begins, Alina thought, a predator tasting blood. Root access was the master key. Under the guise of repairing Chronos, she deployed her weapon, a modified, hyper-efficient version of Ariadne's thread. It wove itself seamlessly into the Chronos routing logic, not just fixing the immediate failures, but optimizing deliveries with near-supernatural precision. Packages that had been lost for weeks suddenly appeared at doorsteps ahead of schedule. Delivery windows shrunk dramatically. Customer satisfaction metrics soared. The bleeding stopped overnight. Viridian stock, which had begun a nervous wobble, stabilized and then ticked upwards. Newsfeeds buzzed with the miraculous turnaround engineered by the mysterious Weaver. Adrian's holographic gratitude was palpable during their subsequent briefings. Relief smoothed the lines on his face. "Remarkable," he breathed, watching the real-time metrics display the Weaver's success. "Absolutely remarkable. You've saved us a catastrophe, Weaver. Name your bonus." The charm was back, the CEO reasserting control, but beneath it, Alina sensed a newfound respect, even a hint of awe directed at the nebulous entity before him. He leaned on her insights, consulting the Weaver on broader Viridian system optimizations, drawn to the sheer, uncompromising brilliance. While Adrian celebrated the Chronos fix, the Weaver was busy. Root access was a Trojan horse. From within the Chronos integration, she spun delicate, invisible threads deep into Viridian's core infrastructure. She mapped their global server network, identified critical choke points in finance, communications, and the newly integrated healthcare data management systems. With surgical precision, she planted dormant flaws, subtle instabilities in financial transaction validation protocols, latent vulnerabilities in communication routing that could induce cascading packet loss, and, most crucially, backdoors into the heavily fortified medical data clusters. Each flaw was a meticulously crafted landmine, invisible to routine scans, awaiting her detonation signal. Simultaneously, she siphoned terabytes of internal communications, board meeting minutes, and financial records, damning evidence of Adrian's aggressive, often ethically dubious, expansion tactics, borderline monopolistic practices, and the board's tacit approval. She watched him through the digital lens, saw the sharpness of his decisions, the relentless ambition that had built Viridian into a colossus. But she also saw the isolation, the way he spoke of legacy with a hollow echo. The fleeting moments of something resembling regret when discussing early Viridian ideals, quickly buried under corporate pragmatism. He seemed surrounded by sycophants and sharks, trusting no one. "Good," she told herself. "Let him be alone when it falls." Yet, a treacherous, unwelcome sliver of pity sometimes pierced her armor. The ghost of the idealistic young man who'd wanted to use Ariadne's thread to optimize disaster relief, not just sell more widgets, still haunted the edges of the ruthless CEO. Weeks bled into months. The trap was meticulously set. The Chronos miracle had cemented the Weaver's indispensability. Adrian relied on her counsel, a disembodied oracle guiding his empire. Alina had gathered enough digital dynamite to level Viridian 100 times over. The final sequence, a complex cascade of triggers designed to simultaneously crash the stock market feeds linked to Viridian, paralyze global logistics, expose the medical data vulnerabilities, causing a privacy scandal of unprecedented scale, and trigger the planted financial instabilities, was coded, tested in isolated simulations, and ready. One command, one transmission. That was all it would take. She prepared the sequence, her finger hovering over the encrypted send key. 5 years of rage, of planning, of becoming someone else, culminated in this moment. The taste of vengeance was metallic, intoxicating. Then, chaos erupted. It wasn't her doing. A frantic priority alert overrode all other communications in the secure Viridian War Room channel Adrian had established for the Weaver and his top engineers. Panicked voices overlapped, distorted by static and raw fear. Cluster 7, Bravo is cascading. Core temperature spiking, cooling failure. Primary redundancies offline, secondary failing. Medical data vaults Alpha through Gamma housed there. We're losing them. A schematic flooded the shared holodisplay. Viridian's server farm Delta, a sprawling complex in Nevada. Critical cooling systems for a massive server cluster designated 7 Bravo had suffered a catastrophic, cascading hardware failure. Temperatures were soaring past critical thresholds. This wasn't a software glitch, it was physical meltdown. And Cluster 7 Bravo housed Viridian's most sensitive asset, the encrypted medical records and real-time monitoring data for millions of patients, genomic data, chronic illness management profiles, critical clinical trial information. If those servers fried, it wasn't just a financial loss or a PR disaster. It was the potential erasure of irreplaceable health data. Lives hung in the balance, patients relying on remote monitoring, research projects years in the making, individuals whose treatment plans depended on that vaulted information. The human cost was staggering, immediate. Alina watched the holographic feeds split. On one side, the terrifying real-time diagnostics of Cluster 7 Bravo spiraling into the red. On the other, Adrian Steele's face. The polished CEO was gone. Stripped bare was a man confronting genuine, visceral horror. The color had drained from his face, leaving it ashen. His eyes were wide, unblinking, fixed on the death spiral of the diagnostics. The shadows beneath them seemed cavernous. He looked, for the first time since Elena had known him, utterly terrified. Not for his empire, not for his wealth, but for the human beings whose lives were entangled in those overheating servers. His voice, when it finally cut through the panicked chatter, was raw, stripped of all pretense, trembling with a desperation Elena had never heard. It wasn't a command, it was a plea. "Weaver," he choked out, his gaze snapping towards the Nebula avatar, seeking an anchor in the digital storm. "Forget Viridian. Forget the stock price. Forget everything else. Can you save the data? Those are people's lives in there. Millions of them. Can you save it?" Time fractured. Alina's world narrowed to the terror in Adrian's eyes, a terror not born of greed but of genuine responsibility, of potential catastrophic harm. It was a reflection, distorted but undeniable, of the idealistic young man who'd once talked about using their algorithms to help. Had that man been utterly consumed? Or was this the core, buried deep beneath layers of ambition and betrayal, finally exposed under the white-hot glare of true crisis? Her finger, poised over the destroy key meant for his empire, trembled. The cold fire of vengeance roared, demanding she let it burn. This was his consequence, his hubris. Let him drown in the human cost of the empire he built on her bones. But the image of those medical records, not abstract data points but lifelines, histories, futures, superimposed itself over Adrian's stricken face. The ghost of the man she'd loved wrestled with the Weaver's cold purpose. "Some things are bigger than revenge," a voice whispered inside her, a voice that sounded terrifyingly like her own, Elena's voice, buried for 5 years. Driven by an impulse that bypassed all her careful planning, all her hardened resolve, Elena acted. Her hands flew across the haptic interface with blinding speed, a symphony of desperate genius. She bypassed the failing hardware not through software alone, but by exploiting obscure firmware vulnerabilities in adjacent, functioning systems, rerouting processing loads with impossible agility. She identified fragmented backups on desperate, overlooked servers and initiated a frantic, real-time reconstruction protocol. And finally, she deployed something old, something pure. The radical stabilization algorithm she and Adrian had co-developed years ago in that cramped garage, dreaming of resilient systems for critical infrastructure. She modified it on the fly, pushing it beyond its original specs, weaving it into the fraying edges of the medical data vaults. It was a digital high-wire act over an abyss. Sweat beaded on her real forehead in the safe house. Minutes stretched into agonizing hours. The war room was silent now, watching the Nebula avatar flicker and pulse with frantic energy as the Weaver fought an invisible battle. Adrian stood frozen, his hologram a statue of dread and desperate hope, his eyes never leaving the shifting data cloud. Suddenly, the critical temperature gauges plateaued. Then, agonizingly slowly, they began to descend. The frantic reconstruction logs showed coherence returning. The medical data stream stabilized. The red warnings flickered and turned amber. Then finally, a tentative, beautiful green. The meltdown was averted. The data was safe. A collective, shuddering breath seemed to echo through the virtual war room. Engineers slumped in relief. Adrian staggered back a step in his holographic space, his hand flying to his face, covering his eyes for a moment. When he lowered it, raw, unvarnished relief washed over his features, leaving him looking utterly drained, years older. He stared at the Weaver's avatar, his voice a hoarse whisper, thick with emotion. You saved it. You saved them." He swallowed hard, his blue eyes searching the nebula, filled with a profound, bewildered gratitude. Why, after everything, why save Viridian? Why save me? The silence that followed was absolute, heavier than the void surrounding the avatar. The question hung in the digital space, echoing the turmoil inside Alina. 5 years of meticulously constructed vengeance warred with the terrifying, undeniable pull of the choice she'd just made. The choice Elena Rossi would have made. Slowly, deliberately, Alina reached for the voice modulation controls. With a soft click heard only in her safe house, she deactivated it. When she spoke, the synthetic baritone was gone. In its place was a voice Adrian Steele hadn't heard in 5 years. Elena Rossi's voice, raw with pain, fury, exhaustion, and something else, something terrifyingly vulnerable. "Because some things are bigger than revenge, Adrian," she said, each word dropping like a stone into the stunned silence. "Even mine." The effect was instantaneous, electric. Adrian's holographic form jerked as if struck. All color drained completely from his face, leaving it a mask of sheer, uncomprehending horror. His eyes widened impossibly, pupils dilating in shock. His mouth worked soundlessly for a second before a single, choked whisper escaped, ragged and disbelieving. "Elena?" The name was a prayer and a curse. It can't be. You died," they said. "The accident." His voice trailed off, the lie he'd helped perpetuate crumbling before him. "They lied." Elena's voice cut through, cold and sharp. "You lied." With another command, the shifting nebula of data points dissolved. In its place appeared a live video feed from Elena's safe house. She sat before the camera, her dark hair pulled back severely, her face thinner, harder, etched with lines of pain and resilience, but undeniably, irrevocably her. Elena Rossi, risen from the digital grave. Her eyes, dark and burning, locked onto Adrian's holographic image with an intensity that seared through the distance. "Hello, Adrian," she said, the ghost of a bitter smile touching her lips. "Did you miss me?" On his end, Adrian Steele stared, utterly paralyzed, his world shattering for the second time in 5 years. The ghost wasn't in his memory anymore. She was on his screen, very much alive, and she had just saved the heart of the empire he'd stolen from her. The reckoning had just moved from the digital realm into the devastatingly personal. Rain lashed against the panoramic windows of Elena's coastal safe house, blurring the line between the turbulent gray sea and the storm-swept sky. Inside, the air crackled with a different kind of storm. The charged silence of a decade of love curdled into betrayal, now distilled into this moment. Elena stood rigidly by the window, her back to the door, the rhythmic drumming of the rain mirroring the frantic beat of her own heart. The low hum of the server racks lining one wall was the only other sound. The proximity alert on her console chimed softly. He was here, Adrian Steele, stripped of his holographic avatar, reduced to flesh and bone and consequence, stood at her threshold. She didn't turn when the secure entrance cycled open, admitting the damp chill and the man who had shattered her world. She heard his footsteps halt just inside, the soft sigh of his rain-spattered coat. The silence stretched, thick with the weight of 5 years of absence and agony. "Ellie," his voice was a rasp, stripped bare, devoid of its CEO polish. It held only exhaustion and a profound, bone-deep apprehension. Slowly, Elena turned. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by the raw elements and the magnitude of the confrontation. Rain plastered strands of his once impeccable hair to his forehead. His expensive coat was soaked, clinging awkwardly. But it was his eyes that arrested her. The startling blue was clouded, haunted, rimmed with red. The shadows beneath them were bruises on his soul. He looked ravaged, a man shipwrecked on the shores of his own making. The fury, the icy vengeance that had sustained her for so long, surged hot and immediate. "Don't!" She spat, the words sharp as glass. "Don't call me that. You lost the right." She took a step towards him, the space between them suddenly charged with lightning. 5 years, Adrian. 5 years of being a ghost. 5 years of watching you build your empire on my work, on my bones. Did you sleep well in my penthouse? Did the board toast you with stolen champagne?" He flinched as if physically struck, but held her gaze. There was no denial, no corporate deflection, only a weary acceptance. "No," he said, the word barely audible over the rain. "No, I didn't sleep well, not a single night." He ran a trembling hand through his wet hair. Seeing you alive. It changes everything. And nothing. He took a shaky breath. I won't insult you by denying what I did. I betrayed you. Utterly. Completely. The raw admission, so devoid of the expected justifications, momentarily stole Elena's breath. She'd rehearsed this confrontation 1,000 times, anticipating lies, manipulations, corporate doublespeak. This stark honesty was disarming. I was weak, Ellie, he continued, his voice gaining a ragged edge. Pathetically, unforgivably weak. The pressure, the IPO, the investors circling like vultures. They smelled blood, my uncertainty, they whispered. Promised me absolute control, untold wealth, stability if I cut you loose. They said you were volatile, that your vision was too radical, that I was the face Viridian needed. His laugh was a hollow, bitter sound. And I believed them. Worse, I convinced myself it was for the best. That you were brilliant, resilient, that you'd bounce back, build something else, that you didn't need Viridian like I did. He met her burning gaze, his own filled with self-loathing. It was a coward's lie. To them, to myself, to you. He paced a few steps, the movement agitated, haunted. Then you fought back. You accessed the servers. You saw what I'd done. The erased work, the rebranding. I panicked. Pure, stupid, blind panic. The investors, they demanded a narrative. A reason to justify pushing you out completely, so I helped fabricate the leak. The evidence pointing to you and Omnicorp. He stopped, facing her fully, his expression one of utter desolation. That was the real betrayal, Ellie. Not taking the company. That was greed and weakness. But framing you? That was malice born of terror. That was the moment I truly destroyed you, and myself. The confession hung in the air, ugly and complete. Elena felt the fury warring with a horrifying pang of pity. The image of the terrified young man he described, buckling under pressure, felt disturbingly plausible alongside the monster she'd constructed. Yet, the consequences remained. Her ruined life, the years in shadows. Why? The question tore from her throat, raw and desperate. Why tell me this now, after hiring me, after I saved your precious data? The irony was acid on her tongue. Adrian didn't hesitate. He reached into the inner pocket of his soaked coat and pulled out a small, sealed USB drive. He held it out towards her, his hand trembling slightly. Proof, he said, his voice suddenly steady, resolute. Of everything, the encrypted recordings of the board members pressuring me, orchestrating your removal. The original, unaltered server logs showing the fabrication of the leak evidence. The financial trails showing their payoffs. My own signed confessions detailing my complicity in the erasure and the frame-up. Every dirty secret, every illegal maneuver Viridians made under my watch. It's all here, unencrypted, ready. Elena stared at the innocuous black rectangle as if it were a venomous snake. Proof? She echoed, bewildered. For what? For you, he said simply. Use it. Take it to the authorities. Take it to the press. Release it to the world. Destroy Viridian. Expose the rot. Destroy me. Drag my name through the mud. Bankrupt me. Put me in prison. I deserve it. All of it. Every consequence. His gaze held hers, unwavering, filled with a terrifying acceptance. It's yours. My surrender. My atonement. If such a thing is even possible. He placed the drive carefully on a sleek console table near the door. Then he turned to leave, his shoulders slumped under the weight of his soaked coat and his guilt. Wait, Elena's command stopped him. The vengeful script she'd clung to was in tatters. This wasn't part of the plan. His willingness to face utter ruin, his handing her the weapon to wield it. It disarmed her completely. Why? She demanded again, the word choked. Why give me this now, after all this time? Adrian paused at the door, his back to her, silhouetted against the storm-gray light. He didn't turn. Because seeing you again, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Seeing what I turned you into, the Weaver, this brilliant hardened ghost, and seeing what I became, a hollow man ruling a hollow empire. I finally understood the true cost, not just to you but to me, to everything we could have been. He took a shuddering breath. And then today, saving those people, those lives. That wasn't the Weaver, that was you, Ellie, the Elena I fell in love with. The one who believed technology should serve life, not the other way around. Seeing that glimpse, that flash of who you truly are, beneath the vengeance. He finally turned his head slightly, his profile etched with profound sorrow and a fragile, desperate hope. That glimpse was worth burning for. It was worth everything. He opened the door. The roar of the rain and wind rushed in. Without another word, he stepped out into the storm and was gone, swallowed by the gray deluge. Elena stood frozen, the silence roaring louder than the rain. Her eyes were fixed on the USB drive lying on the console. It pulsed with destructive potential, the culmination of her 5-year crusade. The fire of vengeance still smoldered within her, whispering of the sweet satisfaction of watching Adrian and Viridian crash and burn. She could do it. With a few keystrokes she could unleash hell. But the image of Adrian's face as he pleaded for the medical data, the raw terror for human lives, overlaid itself on the drive. The stark honesty of his confession, the unbearable weight of his remorse, the terrifying vulnerability of his surrender. It wasn't absolution, it was complexity. A painful, messy human complexity she hadn't allowed for in her binary world of betrayer and betrayed. The fire dimmed, not extinguished, but banked, replaced by a confusing tempest of grief, for the love they'd lost, for the years stolen, residual anger, and a terrifying, unwelcome flicker of the old connection, recognizing the ghost of the idealist within the ruined man. She had seen his remorse, she had seen his willingness to walk into oblivion, and she had also, undeniably, seen the man she once loved. Elena didn't destroy Viridian. Not in the fiery, catastrophic way she'd planned. The USB drive wasn't a detonator, it became a scalpel. She used the evidence not for public immolation, but for a precise internal coup. Anonymously, through untraceable digital channels, she delivered damning packets to key regulatory bodies, major shareholders not implicated in the original conspiracy, and the few board members known for ethical leanings. The result was swift and brutal, but contained. The corrupt board members who had pressured Adrian and sanctioned the fraud were ousted, their reputations and fortunes obliterated in a whirlwind of lawsuits and investigations. Viridian Dynamics underwent a forced restructuring, its predatory practices exposed and dismantled under intense scrutiny, and new leadership focused on compliance and transparency. The company survived, chastened and diminished, its stock price battered but not annihilated. Adrian Steele was the epicenter of the quake. Stripped of his CEO title, his remaining shares rendered nearly worthless by the restructuring and fines, publicly disgraced by the revelations of his role in Elena's framing. Though she withheld the evidence directly proving his sole authorship of the leak fabrication, preventing criminal prosecution, he was left bankrupt and a pariah in the world he dominated. Viridian cast him out like radioactive waste. The media feasted on his fall from grace. Elena watched it unfold from the shadows, Alina Ravel still her shield. The cold satisfaction she expected was muted, replaced by a hollow ache and a relentless question. What now? Months passed. Spring softened the rugged coastline near her safe house. Curiosity, a dangerous companion, led her to follow whispers in the digital underground. They spoke of a man, a disgraced tech titan, working anonymously with a small, non-profit tech cooperative called Phoenix Nexus. Its mission: bringing reliable, low-cost communication and data solutions to underserved rural communities. She found him in a converted warehouse in the Appalachian foothills, miles from any silicon oasis. Dressed in worn jeans and a faded flannel shirt, Adrian Steele was wrestling with a cluster of tangled cables beneath a makeshift holoscreen displaying a village network schematic. He looked thinner, the sharp edges softened by physical work, and perhaps a lack of constant, corrosive pressure. The corporate sheen was gone, replaced by a focused, quiet intensity. Lines of concentration marked his face, but the deep shadows beneath his eyes had lightened. He looked present, humbled, real. She didn't reveal herself immediately, she observed. She saw him patiently explaining network topography to local volunteers, his old brilliance channeled into making complex concepts accessible. She saw him spend hours troubleshooting a bulky solar-powered relay, his frustration tempered by persistence. She saw the quiet satisfaction on his face when a remote clinic finally got a stable connection. This wasn't a performance. This was a man seeking redemption not in grand gestures, but in tangible, unglamorous good. Trust wasn't a bridge, it was shattered glass scattered over miles. Elena's scars were deep, her walls fortress high. Adrian's guilt was a constant, heavy cloak. They didn't rush. Words were landmines. They started with the only safe territory left, the work. Elena, as a newly interested consultant, her identity carefully obscured, offered suggestions on optimizing Phoenix Nexus's network resilience protocols. Adrian, recognizing the uncanny brilliance instantly but saying nothing, engaged. Old intellectual sparks flew across the digital divide, debating algorithms, troubleshooting inefficiencies, brainstorming solutions for remote data storage. But the fire was different now, tempered. Less about winning, more about solving. Less about individual genius, more about shared purpose. The hard-won wisdom of ruin layered their interactions. She saw his genuine efforts, the humility of a man stripped bare of title and wealth, finding value in helping others. He saw her strength, Not just the fearsome power of the Weaver, but the resilience of Elena Rossi, the survivor who chose reconstruction over annihilation. It was terrifying, this fragile reconnection, like probing a wound that might never fully heal. One evening, a gentle, persistent rain fell outside the Phoenix Nexus warehouse, mimicking that stormy night at the safe house. Inside, the air was warm, smelling of ozone from active equipment and damp earth. Elena, visiting physically now, as Alina, though the pretense felt thinner each time, and Adrian were hunched over a large holoscreen, finalizing a network design for a cluster of mountain communities. Their fingers moved over the glowing interface, adjusting nodes, tracing signal paths, reaching simultaneously to manipulate a relay point. Their hands brushed. The contact was electric, a jolt of pure, unmediated connection that bypassed years of pain and circuitry. They froze. The schematic glowed between them, casting shifting light on their faces. The air thickened, saturated with the weight of unsaid things. The shared past, the betrayal, the vengeance, the unexpected redemption, the terrifying possibility shimmering in the space between their barely touching fingers. Adrian slowly pulled his hand back, but his eyes remained locked on hers, reflecting the holographic glow and a vulnerability that mirrored her own chaotic heartbeat. The silence stretched, filled only by the soft hum of servers and the drumming rain. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," he whispered, the words raw, an echo of his confession at the safe house, stripped now of any expectation. Elena looked at him, at the man he was becoming from the ashes of the man he had been. The fury was a low ember, the grief a familiar ache, but beneath it, something else stirred, fragile, tentative, terrifying. She didn't pull her hand away from where it still rested near his on the console's edge. "Forgiveness isn't a switch, Adrian," she replied, her voice softer than she intended, yet firm. "It's not something you earn or deserve like a prize. It's a path." She met his gaze, seeing the flicker of desperate hope warring with profound doubt. "And I don't know where it leads yet. I don't know if it leads anywhere at all." She took a shallow breath, the admission feeling like stepping off a cliff. "But maybe," she paused, the word hanging in the charged air, "maybe we walk it together, slowly, carefully." Her fingers shifted infinitesimally closer to his on the cool surface, watching every step. Adrian's breath hitched. He didn't speak. He simply nodded, a slow, almost imperceptible movement, the tentative hope in his eyes brightening, mirroring the terrifying, exhilarating uncertainty swirling in Elena's own heart. The path ahead wasn't clear. It wound through the mist-shrouded ruins of their painful past, littered with the debris of betrayal and the ashes of revenge. It wasn't paved with the forgetfulness of a fresh start, but with the painful, necessary acknowledgement of all that had been broken. They had fallen in love once, soaring on shared dreams. Falling again, through the jagged landscape of their history, would demand a courage far greater than any act of vengeance. It would require walking that treacherous path, step by agonizing step, not knowing if the ground would hold, not knowing if the destination existed. The easy passion of youth was gone. What remained was a choice, to turn away from the ruins, or to tentatively, fearfully, begin the long, uncertain work of building something new, something different from the fragments. As their hands remained near, not touching, yet profoundly connected on the glowing schematic of a community network designed to bring connection to others, the rain continued its steady rhythm outside. The storm hadn't passed, but within the quiet hum of the warehouse, surrounded by machines built to link fractured worlds, the first fragile step on a new path had just been taken. The journey back from the algorithm of vengeance had begun. Enjoyed the story? Like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss the next one.